So moving right along, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We have Miss Sarah Boone and the forensic pathologist. Now, she's going to go through her credentials, of course, give us some credibility, and she's going to take us through the autopsy of Jorge Torres. Now, I always thought it was just, he suffocated, right? And they said there was some bruising, but I never knew the extent of the bruising and all the markings on his body when they reveal them later on. So this is going to be super interesting. We're going to dedicate an entire video to this woman because she has a lot of good information. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and check this thing out.
Good morning, Doctor. Could you please state and spell your name for the record for us?
Sarah Zadovich, S-A-R-A-Z-Y-D-O-W-I-C-Z.
Thank you. You may inquire.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
Can you tell us, what do you do for a living?
I'm a forensic pathologist.
And who do you work for?
I work for Orange County. We cover Orange County and Osceola County.
And how long have you been a forensic pathologist?
I've been at this office for about 12 years and then 1 year in Tampa, so about 13 years.
And what type of educational background do you have to be a forensic pathologist?
So I have a bachelor's degree in kinesiology from the University of Wisconsin in Madison. I went to medical school in Kansas City, Missouri. After that, I went to Cleveland, Ohio to do a 1 year rotating clinical internship. After that, I went back to the University of Wisconsin. I did my residency in anatomic pathology and clinical pathology. I have 2 fellowships or subspecialty training.
So you get it. She's super qualified. Now moving right along with the Sarah Boone situation. Let's see what she had to say.
Can you tell us what is the cause and manner of death, and is this something that you document?
Yes, so cause of death is either a disease or an injury that ultimately results in an individual's death. Right? So it's very individual and unique to that individual. Manner of death is a way to categorize or group similar types of deaths together. And for manner of death, there's only 5 choices. So there would be natural, accident, suicide, homicide, or undetermined. So those are the manners of death.
In your career, approximately how many autopsies have you performed?
Around 3,000.
And have you previously testified as an expert witness in court?
Yes.
How many times?
Between 75 to 80.
And in what areas have you testified as an expert witness?
Forensic pathology.
Turning our attention to this case, did you perform the autopsy?
Yes.
And what were your findings as to cause and manner of death?
So the cause of death, which I put on the death certificate, is positional asphyxia with environmental suffocation. And the manner of death I classified as homicide.
Now, I mean, just coming out the gate, swinging, homicide. The professional, the woman who did over 3,000 autopsies, that's what she said in her testimony. Over 3,000, she's ruling this a homicide, but yet Sarah's saying it's an accident.
When you perform your autopsy, what information do you have at the time that you begin that examination?
It's incredibly variable. I can have a lot of background information. Sometimes I have none. It just depends on the particular case.
In this case, what information were you provided ahead of time?
So the information I had was that the decedent was with his girlfriend, and at some point in time in the night, he got into a suitcase, which was then zippered shut. At another point at time, I believe she went to bed, and then the next morning discovered that he was still in the suitcase. And I think that was in about an 11-hour time frame from the information that I had.
You mentioned asphyxia. Can you explain for us what asphyxia is?
Sure. So asphyxia is a very general term. It would be kind of like saying, I drive a car, right? That's very generic. And we know that there are many different types of cars out there, right? So asphyxia simply means lack of oxygen or inadequate oxygen for an individual. And there are different categories of asphyxia. So you can have suffocation, which just means that there's obstruction of the airways. So that could be smothering, that could be somebody choking on a piece of food, or maybe just being in an environment where there's not enough oxygen in the air to sustain that individual. There's a category called strangulation. That would be compression of the neck, either blood vessels or airways. There's another category called mechanical asphyxia. That can be when the body is in an unusual or abnormal position where the actual mechanics of breathing can't occur. So that can be the position of the body, or it can be, like, let's say if a heavy object fell on somebody and you simply can't breathe because of the weight of that object. That would be a mechanical asphyxia. And then there's drowning. That's a different type of asphyxia. And there are a couple of other.
Oh my God. You go through all these asphyxias and the jury's already kind of like, So, I mean, the dude suffocated in the suitcase. I think it was kind of mechanical asphyxia. But she's going to explain that it was just the space around him. He couldn't get enough oxygen. Like he ran out of oxygen in that surrounding. That's got to be the most terrifying way to die possible. I'm talking there's air right outside, but you can't breathe it. That shit is crazy while she's upstairs sleeping.
Categories as well that are much less common.
Is there a most common type of asphyxia?
The most common would be ligature compression of the neck. So that would be like an event, a hanging. That would be the most common that we would see.
You also mentioned environmental suffocation. Could you tell us a little bit more what that means in more layman's terms?
So that just means there's not enough oxygen in the environment that the person is in. You could think of somebody who's in an enclosed space where there's a fixed amount of oxygen. So as that oxygen is, as that person is breathing, they're using up all the oxygen. And once it's gone, there's no oxygen left. Or you could think of maybe people who are, climbing Mount Everest. There's not as much oxygen up there, and that's why they have oxygen tanks. So it just means that the amount of oxygen available in the air around that person is not enough to sustain them.
In this case, what can you tell us about how long George Torres was in that suitcase?
There's not a really good way for me to give you a time frame as to how long he was in that suitcase. Again, because there was both the component of positional asphyxia, being in an unusual position for a period of time, and then also the environmental suffocation component. Because within that suitcase, certainly there's going to be oxygen, but it's not going to be the same as if you were sitting in a room like this. And because there are those multiple components happening at the same time, there's not a really good way to estimate or say with scientific certainty, oh, he was in for X amount of time. There's really not a good way to do that.
How about, is there any good way to approximate or determine the time that George Torres died?
There's not a good way to do that either, again, because there are so many different components at play at the time of his death. Sitting in a normal room like this, the percentage of oxygen that's available is about 20 to 21%. If that were to drop to 10 to 15%, the person can be impaired with judgment, they can be impaired with activity. Once that percentage drops between 8 to 10%, most people will lose consciousness. And at a percentage of 8% oxygen or less, that's when we would expect the death to occur. And so again, there's not a really good way to measure the amount of oxygen that would have been available to him in that suitcase.
So that literally means he could have been lingering in that suitcase for hours trying to stay alive. You know what I'm saying? Like literally just gulping for air, hour after hour, attempting to live, and then finally he just passes out and he never wakes up. Crazy shit. And I feel like this, they keep putting the camera on Sarah. She's not looking as, I'm not seeing any smirks or anything. I see a straight face and she's looking down. Every single time you look at her, she's looking down. Face is forward, but those eyes are looking down. She doesn't want to hear it. She doesn't want to think about it. You know why? Because this shit sounds terrible. So not only, hopefully he just got knocked out and he just died like that. But in the worst case scenario, not only was he trapped in there, he stayed in there and died very slowly. But let's continue.
In addition to the fact that he was in an unusual position.
What position were you able to determine he was in that suitcase?
I wasn't able to see what position he was in. By the time that our medical legal death investigators were at the scene, he was already removed from the suitcase. Based on some of the findings, I favor that he was most likely in like a fetal type position. So knees flexed, arms flexed, and the head most likely flexed forward.
Oh my God.
Again, that's from my findings. I didn't see what position he was in.
What side of his body would he be resting on in this fetal position?
That's that most likely his left side. However, I do say the caveat that some of the findings are dependent on time, meaning that, if that suitcase had been moved or flipped over, that could be different than what I'm seeing at the time of my examination.
Tell us, what is skin slippage?
So after death, the body goes through a series of progressive changes. And one of those changes is skin slippage. And what that does is it tells me that that person is a little bit further away from the actual time of death. So it's not something that's going to occur immediately after death for most people. It's something that would occur a little bit later on in that process of changes that happens after death.
And tell us, what is rigor mortis?
So rigor mortis is also called the post-mortem stiffening of muscles. And again, that's one of the changes that occurs after death. Most of the times that will occur before we see skin slippage. But these changes are very variable from individual to individual. And it also depends a lot the environment the person is in. So for example, those changes that we're going to see happen more quickly in a warm environment. If somebody who maybe is engaged in a physical or violent struggle, those changes are going to occur more rapidly. And then it also depends on the person themselves, their relative size, their relative health. Those things can all impact the changes that we see after death.
How does skin slippage and rigor mortis inform your findings about how long George Torres was likely in that suitcase?
So again, the time frame that I had was about 11 hours, just from the last time that he was known to be in the suitcase versus the time that he was found. So I'm basing it off of that. So about an 11-hour time period. Well, when I did my examination, the rigor mortis was already dissipating or leaving. Also, there was some skin slippage. And so if he had not been in the suitcase, if he had been out of the suitcase, I would not expect that advanced amount of change. It's compatible with him being in that suitcase for a longer period of time. It would have been warmer. And also if he had been, struggling to get himself out, engaging that physical activity, those are things that are going to accelerate or speed up that process. So my findings at the time of the examination are compatible.
And imagine just breathing out. I'm getting claustrophobic just thinking about it. Imagine just breathing out your own hot air and breathing it back the fuck in. You know what I'm saying? She wanted to do this, guys. Now we have to live through everything play by play, piece by piece. And right after this, we're going straight to the diagram. So that's where we're heading to next. But, now we get to relive this, Sarah. Not just you, though. The people who I'm sure the jury, come on, bro. The jury's heard about this. There's not a world where you could tell me they found somebody that didn't know about this case. They're really good if they did. But anyway, so the people are listening to this shit over or for the first time. And it doesn't sound good. It sounds like a dude was struggling and scraping and crying and trying to save his life. Imagine breathing your hot air in and out and in and out, and then the whole suitcase starts getting hot. You ever get into like a cardboard box and you close the lid? As kids, you close the cardboard box lid. What? 5 minutes and you need to bust that shit open, right? Because you're breathing in carbon monoxide. So that's crazy. But anyways, let's move forward and let's go check out some photos and then this autopsy.
Pam, I'm showing you photo 1 from State's composite. Tell us, what is this a photo of?
So this is the identification photo that's basically just showing from about the level of the collarbones up.
And this is George Torres.
Yes.
Did you note any signs of injury in this photo?
Yes, so there's some ecchymoses around the left eye. This picture, it's a little bit hard to see, but I think there's another one coming up. There's also an area of ecchymoses up here on the left side of the forehead.
Now, clearly they're showing his face and the cameraman is not going to let us see it. But look at Sarah's face. We almost could see his face through hers if we were to look at her really good. If we were really to go and look at her and really look into her eyes, you would be able to see the face because she had to look at it. And I know that, listen, them pictures right here today, or from whenever she saw them back then, these pictures are going to stay with her. The pictures, being there in person, but actually the autopsy, the breakdown, the opening up of the body, these are going to stick with her when she's in that fucking cell rotting away. Trust me on that.
With also some swelling associated with that. The lips have some contusions and small lacerations. And then on the left shoulder here, you can see a little bit of some ecchymoses here. Or again, ecchymoses are kind of like big bruises.
Turning to photo 2 from State's composite. What are we looking at in this photograph?
So this is his right arm near the elbow. And right here you can see this kind of darker area. So this looks similar to an abrasion, but it's actually it's what's called drying artifact. And again, this is one of the reasons that I think that he was in that suitcase for a little bit longer. Most likely that was a pressure point where part of that suitcase was resting on his elbow in that area. And then after death, that tissue dries out, and that's the discoloration that you're seeing there.
Damn.
Turning to States 3 from the composite.
So here you can see a little bit better.
Damn, you see his lips and his teeth and shit. She fucked him up, bro. And the jury, she, again, I'm going to say this over and over. She wanted this. She wanted this so bad. What is wrong with her, bro? I'm sure there's the toilet wine in the prison can't be that strong. In the jail, it can't be that strong. So what in the liquid courage came over your ass to make you feel like you could fight this trial? There's pictures. There's the world famous video. There's the interrogation video. There's memes built off of that interrogation, and you want to fight that? All right.
You can get a feeling for this, but this area is what we call edema or swelling. So this whole area is edema. It's a little bit discolored, so ecchymosis, and then again, really at the corner of the eye here, you can see that darker discoloration. And so those are injuries from blunt force trauma.
States 4 from the composite.
So this is the left shoulder and arm. So again, you can see this kind of red to purple area. So this is all ecchymoses, and then a couple of linear abrasions or scratches.
States 5 from the composite.
This is the same area, just a little bit closer up, so you can see this whole area of ecchymoses. It's a little bit variegated, differential in color, but again, that's all blunt force trauma.
And what part of the body is this we're looking at?
This is the left shoulder.
States 6 from the composite.
That's the same area, but in this picture we have a scale, or the ruler.
And why?
That looks like the bottom of a foot. They said that's his shoulder. Do you see how discolored that is? Do you see how messed up? That means he was struggling, bro. He was probably trying to just like flex his way to pop the zipper, but it didn't work. They said that's his shoulder. Now, again, this is a deceased person, so the skin does look all fleshed out. Different colors are showing, but it's still bruised to hell. Like crazy. Like if he was still alive, he would be, it would took him probably a week and change to recover from the bruise. You know what I'm saying? Crazy, bro.
We use scales and rulers.
That's just to give an idea of how big the area is or how large the injury is.
States 7 from the composite.
So this is the left forearm and hand, and you can see the area right here that's a little bit red to purple, and then also right here on the left hand, right here and here. Those are all areas of ecchymosis, again, blunt force trauma.
States 8 from the composite.
Again, the left arm. Just from a little bit of a different angle, so you can see, and a little bit with the elbow too here, but you can see all these areas, ecchymosis.
All right, so basically a bunch of pictures of blunt force trauma all over his body. So we're going to get to the questions on what she believes it could have been or could not have been.
So we've discussed and seen evidence of many different injuries. In total, how many blunt impact injuries did you identify?
I can't give you an exact number. Again, you can have multiple impacts in a very close area, so it can be hard to discern each one. They can overlay each other, or they can be so close to each other. But at least 5 to 6, most likely more than that.
Damn. And this is blunt force. This is like me smacking my head against the beam of the doorway by accident at full speed. Like blunt force trauma, you're hit pretty fucking hard. 5 or 6 or more. She was ragdolling him. And again, listen, 150-pound woman, 103-pound man. She could pick him up. A suitcase has a handle, right?
And when you were going through your body chart as well, and I guess we also saw some of it photographically, as you also mentioned impact to the left side of the head.
Yes.
And I believe that was subgaleal?
Subgaleal, so kind of similar to what I was describing on the back. I looked at the underside of the scalp. And so in those areas on the left side of his forehead where there was the edema, when we reflect or we fold the scalp over, there was hemorrhage or bleeding that went through the entire scalp and was deposited on the skull. There was no associated skull fracture, and there was no bleeding inside of the skull, but it was all in the scalp and deposited on the outer surface of the skull.
So under the skin, but not under the skull?
Correct.
Your Honor, I have no further questions at this time.
Thank you.
Now, this sounds more so like an assault to me, right? This is sounding more like an assault. At first, I thought it was Sarah being a bitch, locking her boyfriend up in the suitcase. Okay, he died. Send her to jail for those reasons. But now it's like, hold on. This seems like a lot. This seems like she locked him in the suitcase, got the bat, smacked him, stomped him, picked him up, threw him down the stairs, beat him up some more, spit on the suitcase. It sounds like she did a lot more than zip him in the suitcase and fall asleep. And for years, I feel like everybody felt like that was all that there was to it. Okay, she locked him in the suitcase and accidentally killed him. Send her to jail. Whatever, however you feel about that, whatever you think she deserves for that. But now the narrative is turning to the suitcase was the least of his problems. That's what it's sounding like. The real problem was him not being able to defend himself from a crazy lady. But anyway, before we move forward, we need to go back to the chart that she drew out just so you can get a visual representation. Since you couldn't see every single picture, they're probably quite gruesome. Let's go back to her digital chart that she made, and she'll explain everything kind of just on a graph so you can see it properly. Let's check it out.
Oh, it's a copy of my body diagram.
And does this fairly and accurately represent the diagram that you created, in this case, for George Torres?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time I'd like to move what's previously been marked for identification as states R into evidence.
No objection. What was pre-marked as states R will be received into evidence without objection at states 12.
So, ma'am, on this body chart, can you describe for us and point out what was the first blunt impact injury that you identified?
So there were some blunt impact injuries to his head. I don't think it's on this one, but there were some blunt impact injuries to his head right up here around the eye and on the mouth area.
And then, did you notate any injuries to his hand?
Yes, so there were some ecchymoses, or you can think of that as like a large kind of bruise on both hands.
What other...
The large bruise on both hands. What do you think he did that to block something? Or do you think when he just fell down the stairs, his hands just slammed against the wall or something? But it's giving me the idea that he's blocking something. Maybe a fucking baseball bat.
Blunt impact injuries did you identify?
So there was a series of ecchymoses on the left side of the back, which right about here.
And any others?
There were some on the forearms as well.
And you use this body chart, you say, in addition to photographing the injuries that you document, correct?
Yes.
As part of your examination, and I believe it's on the body chart itself, do you document the height and weight of the person as well?
Yes.
And what was the height of Mr. Torres?
So technically for us it's length. Height is the measurement that's taken while someone is standing. So his length was 62 inches and his weight was 103 pounds.
And you guys were dead on the money. 103 pounds. A 103-pound man taking that type of injury, he's not making it, bro. I'm telling you that much. Your body can't even repair itself. What type of nutrients is there to repair you with? You know, you need food, so you need food for energy. You know what I'm saying? So he was in a bad situation from the start. And every moment of this trial so far right now is sounding like Sarah Boone premeditatedly attacked him. She said, we're going to get him drunk. We're going to do this stuff. We're going to zip him in the suitcase. We're going to kill him. Well, we're not going to kill him. I take that back. We're going to teach him a lesson. Crazy, bro. You took that shit way too far. That lesson turned into a death. But let's go and see what the defense had to say. I don't know what they're going to say, but there's nothing much you could do with this one. So let's see what they pull out their ass.
Any cross-examination?
Yes. Doctor, good morning.
Good morning.
My name is James Owens, and I'm one of the lawyers that represents Sarah Boone here today. And I've got a few questions.
Even the way he introduced himself, my name is blah, blah, and I'm the one representing Sarah Boone. You ever see Johnny Cochran walk in and be like, hello, my name is Johnny Cochran, and I'm here to represent the juice. No, he just gets to business. My name's James Owen, and I'm here to represent Sarah Boone. The fuck, bro? Huh?
Now, how many of those cases of the 3,000 that you've done where you found environmental suffocation?
Probably 2 to 3.
So very few?
Yes.
In a positional asphyxia case, That's kind of an example, like you get stuck in a hole, and as you breathe, you sink deeper into the hole, or it tightens.
It can be anything that impairs the actual physical aspect of breathing. So that could be if the neck is flexed very much forward, and so that way cutting off the air supply up towards the top of the head. That could be something compressing around the torso, so not being able to take a full breath. So those are examples of
Or another example may be falling out of a tree stand and getting suspended upside down,
yes,
or the majority of the blood gets in the top half of the body.
yes.
Would you agree in those type situations that the deaths occur fairly quickly, usually within an hour?
They can. It depends again on the situation.
Now, you said Mr. Torres was 5'2" and 103 pounds.
Yes.
Do you know how big the suitcase was that Mr. Torres was in?
I don't have the exact measurements with me.
So if I told you the measurements, you wouldn't know one way or the other what they were?
No, I think they were described to me, and I saw the pictures from the scene, and I was able to review crime scene photos to see what the actual suitcase was like.
Okay. Do you know the crown to rump length of Mr. Torres?
No.
Did you do any demonstrative study on the suitcase to determine what kind of spacing he would have inside that enclosure?
So this is a janky ass defense. I mean, I could do this myself. What are you going for? He was a skinny guy. He was small and the suitcase was big. That's the defense. I mean, I could have scratched that up in my notebook real quick for you in 15 minutes. Why did it take 5 years? The guy was small and the suitcase was big, so he should have been able to breathe, right? So that doesn't make sense. Come on, jury. That doesn't make sense. It was an accident. She was a battered spouse. Bro, please.
Enclosure.
No.
And you don't know the position that Mr. Torres or his orientation at the time that he was in the suitcase was?
Again, I favor a fetal position, but again, I didn't observe him in the suitcase.
But you don't know exactly what the positional component was that caused, or what led you to believe caused his death.
Correct. I mean, based on his stature and what the suitcase was, he would have had to have flexed at the hips and knees to be able to fit into the suitcase.
So based on what you've said, you would agree you didn't know how much Mr. Torres would have been able to move and stretch his various extremities inside the suitcase, do you?
No.
So you would agree that his repositioning inside the suitcase would have been easier if he didn't have so much alcohol in his bloodstream?
I don't know that I would agree with that.
Excuse me?
I don't know that I would agree with that.
Well, you said his fine motor skills would be impaired by the alcohol.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought you meant his ability to just move.
To reposition himself inside this, that would be limited to some degree by the alcohol he consumed.
It could be. I mean, that's not really a fine motor skill. But
Okay. Or the use of his hands to unzip the suitcase would
Sure.
be affected by the alcohol that he had consumed.
Sure, that could be.
Okay. Now, the environmental suffocation deals with the lack of oxygen.
Yes.
Correct? And due to that insufficient oxygen that we breathe in the air, so you essentially run out of the oxygen in the space.
Yes.
So I guess years ago, how this sometimes would occur was a child would somehow get into an old refrigerator and it would be enclosed, so it was airtight, and eventually you would run out of oxygen.
Yes.
You would agree with that?
Yes.
And I think you said the normal makeup of air has about 20% oxygen?
Yes.
I love how she widens her eyes every time she answers, yes, yes. That's probably just how she responds, but it's kind of like when she gets asked dumb questions, those eyes will light up. She's like, yes. But I guess, man, he's a small guy, but what's the whole point? It's a small, he didn't die of spatial asphyxiation, so where did he die of?
So we had either a decrease in the oxygen levels or a low concentration of oxygen.
Yes. Yes. And also, keep in mind that while he's in there, every time he's exhaling, he's pushing out carbon dioxide. Okay, so again, whatever oxygen is there is most likely diminished because it is an enclosed space. It doesn't have to be no oxygen, but it's decreased from what we would have in a normal room. But every time that he's exhaling, there's more carbon dioxide that's in that space as well. So that displaces any oxygen that might be there too.
So what volume of air do we inhale and exhale in a normal breath?
Well, it depends. I mean, you can take a deep breath, you can take a shallow breath. It depends. And then there's also the rate at which people breathe. So that's variable.
So if it was average, would you say 500 milliliters on average?
Depends on the person.
Well, would you agree that at rest, you take a normal number of breaths per minute of 12 to 14?
That would be considered the normal range, yes.
So 6 to 7 liters per minute
Yes.
at rest? Do you know the volume of room air contained in that suitcase?
No.
Do you know how porous the fabric of that suitcase was?
No.
Did you run any tests?
So what we're going for here is that he didn't die from suffocation. I just want to know where they're going with these questions. So he didn't. Okay, he's too small. That type of death usually happens quickly. Okay, so what did happen then? How are we going to explain away all the bruises all over his body? He died in the suitcase, so what happened if he didn't suffocate?
Test on the suitcase.
No.
Were you aware that the suitcase, the lock on it or the zipper on it was broken? The pull handles were broken?
Yes, I did know that.
Do you agree if there is a portion of the zipper that's open that air can travel in and out of that space?
Yes.
Do you know what the anticipated exchange of gases would be through that fabric?
No.
Do you know if, the suitcase was out in the rain and it rained, do you know whether or not rain or the liquid would pierce the interior?
I don't know.
So from what I gather, no studies were done on the suitcase.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. So we don't know that zipper being busted, what exchange of air could go in and out.
Correct.
I think you said there are physiological effects once the value or percentage of oxygen is decreased from the norm.
Yes.
You said 8 to 10% you become unconscious,
Yes.
and then a value of less than 8% death occurs.
For most people, yes.
Excuse me?
For most people,
And the normal oxygen saturation in adults and children is 95 to 100%.
yes.
So if it decreases, the oxygen decreases less than 10%, someone would lose consciousness and die within less than 30 minutes.
So that's hard to give a time frame on that. Studies that have been done shown if the oxygen, content is anywhere from 4 to 6, unconsciousness can occur in less than a minute, death within minutes. But those have been empirical studies.
So, and I know that's kind of, maybe you tell me, that's kind of why you gave the two different diagnoses, the environmental and the positional, is because the environmental may have had an effect or the positional may have had an effect. You're not sure, so you listed them both?
It's not that I'm not sure. I think that both mechanisms were at play at the same time, and that's not unusual in deaths, is there can be multiple factors occurring at the same time.
But you don't know.
So they try to basically berate her with questions to discredit her diagnosis. But what I want to know here is, what's your diagnosis? What happened? She screamed him to death? He drank to death. He died from the alcohol? What's your theory? Since her medical record and everything that she does is just guessing, she had to put 2 down. You know what I'm saying? He's trying to discredit her profession. He's trying to discredit what she knows to be true. But I mean, not very effective in my opinion. I feel like the jury could see right through it. If I'm there, I listen to what she had to say and I believe it, bro. Tight ass suitcase, can't breathe, neck is bent fully forward. Oxygen's getting cut off. Like, it's obvious. I don't think you even need a real medical degree to be like, hey, I think he might have suffocated in there. You know what I'm saying? But anyways, I just want to hit you guys with this episode real quick. I am going to continue covering this thing. We need to continue through day 2. Day 3 is already underway. We're going to fall behind, but we're pulling out the major witnesses, in my opinion, and we're just going to slowly go through it and break this thing down piece by piece, folks. So until then, everybody, stay inside and stay safe. I appreciate y'all for coming out. I'll see y'all later.